Hey guys, it's EJ with Blockpad, and in this video, I want to talk about the organizational structure of values inside of a Blockpad file. So if you use Blockpad, you're probably familiar with our top level frames, which you can find over here. And these can be reports or this word processor environment like you see here. These can also be spreadsheets or notebooks or drawings. And aside from just being different environments with different content inside, these also act as boxes that store values, and then you can reference these values between these boxes. So for example, if I come over here to Notebook and I press the equal sign, I can navigate over to Report 1 and click this value and press Enter, and I can reference that value and do calculations with it from another top level frame inside of the file. In Blockpad, we call these boxes that can hold values namespace containers. And these can be more than just these top level frames. They can also be things like sections or tables or multi-line cells, different objects that can be inside of these frames and also act as boxes that can sort of contain these values. To give you an idea of what it looks like from like the top level, I'll press the equal sign and type in the word document. And in the formula language, the word document is going to represent this entire file that I'm in. So I can press a period to sort of access all of the things inside of the document. So here you see report 1, 2, and 3, sheet 1, canvas, so all of my top level frames. So if I type in report 1 and press period, I see all of those things in that first level of report 1. So I see A, B, and C. I see section A, section B, and section C, but not the values inside of that. If I wanted to see the values inside of section A, I have to type that in and press period, and then now I see area, length, and width. And that's because section A is acting as a namespace container, sort of capturing those values inside of a box. So now if I type in area and press enter, I can reference this area value inside of section A. Of course, to reference that value, I don't always need this full path document.report1.sectionA.area, but depending on where I am in the file, I may need more or less of it. So if I tab over here and press the equal sign, now I'm in the report but outside of section A. If I click this value, it's going to automatically put in section A dot area because that's as much of the path that I need to be able to reference that area value. If I go inside of section A and press the equal sign and then click area, then all I need to type in is just the word area because I'm inside of that same namespace container as area. Or if I come over here to this notebook and press the equal sign, navigate back here and click area, you'll see it's report1.sectionA.area. And I'll click OK, and I can reference that value and again do math with it. Because from a separate top level frame, that's as much of the path as I need to reference that value. Now, these namespace containers can also be nested further inside of that top level frame. So if I come down here, I have section level 1, and then inside of that, I have section level 2, and inside of that, I have section level 3. So as I go back up from section level 3, I have to type in more of these section level names to reference it until finally from outside in this report, if I click pressure, I have to type in this full section level 1, section level 2, section level 3 dot pressure. And that's going to reference all the way to that pressure because I sort of have to open each box, each namespace container as I go into it to finally get to this value. So that's sort of a high level view of how it works. You've got these namespace containers that act as boxes inside of boxes, and then inside of the formula language, you have to use those namespace container names to sort of open that box to get into it. But what are some practical considerations for actually using Blockpad? First is that named containers are going to make things clearer. So over here, all of my frames are just these automatically generated names, report 1, 2, and 3, sheet 1, etc. But I can double click these and change these names to what's actually inside of them. So I can double click this and change this to intro, or I can double click this and type in global values and press enter. And so now almost right away, my file becomes much more intelligible, much clearer. And you can do this for more than just these top level frames. So if I go over here to global values, if I hover over this table and click this tag, you can see I have the option to change the name, which I've already done here. If I go over to calc sections, you see all of these different sections I have named circle 1, which if I go over to properties, you can see here in the properties, or hypotenuse 1 or rectangle 1. And all of this is going to serve to make your formulas and equations and also just navigating your file much clearer. Another good thing to know about is you have some math layout options for referencing these namespace containers. So going back to the intro, I'll click this and go to math layout. And there's two options in math layout related to namespace containers. First is member access. So by default, it's a period, but I can change the display to be an arrow. So you can see if I double click here, my formula is still a period, but in my display, instead of a period, I get that arrow. The second option is that you can hide the namespaces altogether. So I'll change this from no to yes and click OK. And when I do that, even though in my formula I have this sort of full path with all of these namespace containers, in the display, I just see pressure. So that can be useful for making your formula display much more concise if it starts to get long because of namespace containers. Moving on, another good thing to know is the capture values property, which you'll see for all namespace containers. And the capture values property is going to essentially turn off a namespace container as a container. So if I come here to section A and click this tag, I can change capture values over here in the properties window to no. And when I do that, you'll see I get an error for these two now, because now section A is not part of that path. So if I backspace out of this, you see all I need now is area. And if I delete this section A part here, you see document.intro.area is that 10 feet squared because we're sort of skipping over section A. It's like if I turned section A from a closed box to an open box and made all of those values available to that sort of next level. For sections in particular, this can be useful if what you really want is to hide a section, but keep all of the values acting like normal for the rest of the file. It can also be useful for formatting, like here I have these different sections with a different background. You can do that without capturing those values. And this capture values property is going to be available on all namespace containers, not just sections. So that's going to include top level frames. To turn capture values off for a top level frame, you will right click it and then select properties. And then over in the properties window, change capture values to no. And now, when I go anywhere in the document in any frame, I can reference those values and functions and tables inside of global values directly. So for example, I can use the hypotenuse function and type in 3 feet and 4 feet, and that's going to work. I can also press the equal sign and reference the E value that I have over here in global values. And so this is great if you have custom functions or universal values or reference data. You can make it available directly for your entire file without referencing a frame name first. One more thing I wanted to discuss for capture values is that multi-line cells have capture values off by default. So if I come down here and I insert a table in word processing mode and click OK, this is actually a table of multi-line cells, which are namespace containers, but with capture values off. So I'll right click, select cell, and look over here and you'll see capture values is no. That's also going to be if you put a multi-line cell in a spreadsheet. So if I go to table and merge cells, then change this to a multi-line cell. So now that this is a multi-line cell, I can do things like type in text and formulas. Now, normally if I wanted to reference this formula, I can just click it and it'll reference it directly. But let's say I did want to capture values. Then I can right click, select cell, change capture values to yes. I would suggest giving it a name. So here I'll write in my values and press enter. So now if I press the equal sign and reference it, it'll be myvalues.a. And then I can use that in formulas just like any other value. Moving on, the next thing I wanted to mention is duplicate values. So in Blockpad, you can't have the same name twice in a namespace container. So if I press the equal sign and say a equals 10, the equal sign again, a equals 20, then I get this blue tag. And if I hover over it and look at the bottom, I'll see warning duplicate member A. And then if I tried to reference A, say, for example, A squared, then I'm going to get an error. You'll see my message at the bottom is duplicate member A. And that's because Blockpad doesn't know which of these A's to use, since it doesn't work top to bottom. So for example, if I came up here and type in A squared, that would also work if I didn't have the duplicate names. So one way to fix this is just to wrap these in a new namespace container. So I can select this, go to Insert, Section, and click OK. And then now I no longer get that error. And I'm going to wrap this in another section so we have these two separate sections. And so now this is going to work just fine. So there's more to say than I want to mention in this video, but we cover this topic in another video that I'll put a link to in the description. Now, one last thing I wanted to cover is that copying frames and sections can be a great way to manage your calculations in Blockpad. So you can copy top-level frames a few ways. The first is to right-click and then select Duplicate, and that's going to essentially copy and paste that frame to the spot right below it. Another option is that you can right-click a frame and select Copy, and then if you hover over to the right side of these top-level frames, you'll see this plus sign. If you click that, you can paste in that copied frame, and that's going to do the same thing as duplicate, except you can put it where you want. And when you copy paste this way, you can actually paste entire frames into a new file. So if I come up here to create a new tab and select new document, I can hover over, get that plus sign, and click paste, and paste that spreadsheet into an entirely new file. This, of course, is going to work with all top-level frames, so I can right-click this and say copy, and then come back over here, and then paste that in. So this is a great way to keep calculation templates in a frame that you can then copy-paste into new files as you need them. Another good use is to copy-paste sections with preset calculations. So I can select this tag, press Ctrl-C to copy, and then go over into this new file and paste this in as many times as I need to, and I'll get circle 1, circle 2, and so on. And this will generally work with all objects in Blockpad, including tables and drawings and all of that stuff. Just select the tag, press Ctrl-C, and then you can go wherever you need to and press Ctrl-V to paste that in. So that's all I wanted to cover with you guys today on frames and containers. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thank you.